Greetings, everyone. It's a Q&A session for August 2024. We have some really good questions this month. I'm going to try to get to all of them, so let's get into it. Chris asks, should we be taking breaks from the herbs that we work with every single day? I'm assuming in a medicinal therapeutic focus. And the answer is, it depends, right? There are some herbs that, even though they're super gentle and super commonplace, are absolutely not okay to take long term. They're great for a month, even 6 months, sometimes a year, but then there needs to be a clearing break after that so that we don't develop tolerance or sensitivity to those plants. There are formulas that are poorly made, that don't have synergizing or harmonizing herbs in them, which make them too energetically aggressive for the body. Again, sometimes they're made from the most gentle, just basic, commonplace herbs that you know, but they can start leading to problems that people don't associate, with them, right? So that's part of it. We, of course, have a class of herbs called tonic herbs or rasayans or adaptogens that are intended to be taken long term and actually work better when we give them profound amounts of times, years on end, in order to sort of peel the onion and go deeper. But the reason that they are in that class is because they are the exception to the rule. So generally, we should think that all herbs need breaks. One thing that I want to angle here is that if a formula is correct, if the correct herbs were chosen for the person, the temperament is right, the energetics are right, the movement and direction of the plants is right for the individual, then there's no reason why the formula should need to be taken long term, because it will do what it's supposed to do, right? We'll get the problem solved. So I tend to think less about how long should an individual herb or a formula be taken from a therapeutic angle, and more in terms of, if the original problem hasn't been fixed, why not? Where's the problem with the formulation? Where's the something's missing, so it needs to be reformulated. That person, I would tell them to go back to their herbalist and say, hey, we're 2 months in, 3 months in, and I'm not seeing this pattern unwind. We need to reassess, right? So that's how I think about it. And again, with all herbal medicine, it always depends. Some people's bodies can take more, some people's need less. We always have to keep a pulse on things, literally and figuratively, to see what needs to be adjusted and changed for that individual. Chris's next two questions I'm going to answer with one answer, which is, it looks like Chris is reading some Viral. Awesome. We love him. And reading a little bit about astrology and herbalism, or Astro-Herbalism. And also asked about Spagyrics, and I will give you one resource for both of those things, and that resource is, of course, Sajjah Popham from the School of Evolutionary Herbalism. I personally do not practice or have any interest in Astro-Herbalism. It's not part of the tradition that I practice, and it's not really part of the animistic ways that I follow. So I know very, very little. I'm probably the worst person to ask about it, but Sajjah that's his thing, right? And he focuses his herbal work on Spagyrics. So you can get a 2-for-1 by checking his stuff out. I'm going to try to remember to put a link in the details below. If not, School of Evolutionary Herbalism, you'll find his stuff. Next, Spencer. This is a cool question, no pun intended. How to make friends with summer heat, right? A lot of us are challenged in the summertime by the heat, the long days. Spencer brings up like how hard it is to sleep, when it's hot. Some people talk about how it's hard to have an appetite. It's hard to go outside and play. And summer's going to happen. And, the way of things right now is the summers are going to just keep getting hotter. So we do have to figure out ways to make friends with summer. And I'm going to end with the most important thing, I think, but let me give you a few things to consider. First is, there are, of course, herbs that we can work with to help our bodies regulate more efficiently in the summer. For some people, it's going to be cooling diaphoretics that open up the pores and help us sweat and manage internal heat buildup more efficiently. For some people, it's going to be just straight up refrigerant herbs, right? Like hibiscus, that will help the body regulate core temperature and kind of slough off excessive heat. And those herbs can actually make us feel better. They help us carry ourselves in a cooler way when we step out into the heat of summer. Another thing is in the spaces where we have control over temperature, not making rooms so cold that when we walk outside into the natural summer heat, that contrast is like excessively stressful on the body, right? Trying to learn to be comfortable in warmer temperatures is part of it. I also think about the opposite energetic of summer. So summer is ruled by southern fire, right? And opposite that is northern earth. And the energetics of earth are cool and dark, whereas the energetics of fire are hot and bright. So deep earth work can be very, very helpful during this time. Getting your feet on the soil, spending time in deep earth places and caves and dark forests where it's naturally more cool, and doing deep earth meditations, growing your roots down into the land, kind of connecting with that cool, dark energy can be a nice sort of balance to the heat of summer. The final thing, and this is the most important thing, is we always just have to think in terms of harmony, right? That if the summer comes up and it makes you run hot and dry, you have to think of cooling, moistening herbs, cooling, moistening foods, cooling, moistening activities, cooling and moistening headspaces. That we should always respond to what our body gives us, especially those omens of discomfort. So, if the heat rises and you start getting anxious and unsettled, that kind of energy of a fire, we have to think, what's the opposite of that? What kind of information can we bring into the body through herbs and food and practices that can help harmonize that, right? Not shut it down, because summer is summer, but give your body some tools to cope, right? And navigate that a little more efficiently. So, good question. Thank you. Next one, Rebecca is asking, what are the differences of magic/witchcraft and sorcery, especially it seems like from the etymological standpoint, which I love, and what are my resources for saying the things that I say? So you will hear me say all the time in classes that I don't identify as a witch, I don't practice witchcraft, and I don't think that those terms have a place in the work that I do. And the reason for that is that it is only in very, very recent history, like since the 1950s, that these terms have been reclaimed in a positive light, right? When you look at the ancestral relations with witchcraft, you will see that first and foremost, no witches would have called themselves that ever. That's just not how that worked. And two, witches were never considered good, with like very, very few exceptions where there had to be a prefix qualifier, like saying somebody was a white witch or a good witch, right? And that is incredibly, incredibly rare and incredibly late. Witches have always been associated with malefic acts, right? That's just the way things are. My particular resources for this way of thinking come from two scholars in particular, and I highly recommend everybody read these two and everything they write. First is Emma Wilby, and the second is Owen Davies. And these two are presenting scholarly information about early modern, because that's about as far back as it goes, early modern witchcraft all the way through contemporary witchcraft, and why these terms don't reflect the actual nature of cunning folk, of pellers, of wise women and wise men, of herb-wise people. They never would have associated with that term. It doesn't mean what we've been told it means in the contemporary. And now, that being said, I personally don't have a problem with people using that word. Other words exist that are more accurate, but it requires an amount of study and an amount of depth that most people aren't willing to invest. So there's nothing wrong with witch, and honestly, we've kind of redefined it anyway with some of these modern neo-pagan witchcraft movements. We've given it a new etymological rooting, right? So there's nothing wrong with it, but historically it's not accurate, and because I do so much ancestral work, I don't like to bring that word to the table. It's just not a good one. So I choose the word sorcery because sorcery is first and foremost rooted in the old ways. It's rooted in our ancestral traditions of animism, and it's non-dogmatic. There's no structure, and other than the weird things about Hollywood, it's never been misrepresented or misappropriated in the way that witch and witchcraft names have been. So for me, sorcery is ritual magic and observance based on animistic perspectives through allied pacts with helping spirits, right? Whether those spirits be animals or plants or ancestors or deities, doesn't matter, right? So those two resources, Emma Wilby, Owen Davies, Claude LeCouteux is also another one that can be a little dry for some people, but those are scholars whose work has informed my practice for many, many years, and I really trust what they say and how they say it. So good books to read. Last one from Carrie. This one is particularly appropriate in this moment. I've actually been trying to film the Q&A this month for 3 days, but haven't been able to find a time when there's not leaf blowers and lawnmowers happening somewhere, right? So I just had to do it. And you're probably going to hear them in the background because they're happening now. So Carrie is asking about loudness, and modern ways of life, right? Like how to honor land and practices with all of this noise, with all of this crazy stuff happening, with all the toxic stuff that happens, right? And I don't necessarily have a nice, clean answer for you because this stuff frustrates me too. I want to go out and sit with the plants in quiet. I want to go out and work with the fae in quiet. I want to be able to go for a morning walk and not have to navigate leaf blowers and super loud trucks and all of that. But it's just how things are. So this, for me, is more a game of harmonizing, trying to figure out what we can do. Sometimes that means waking up early or staying up late to get those quiet moments. Sometimes it means when you have any kind of influence over a space, doing what you can to create some privacy, some sacredness, some quiet. And really, we try to behave like the old gods, right? In these ways. And this is like the best way that I can think of describing this, that we will have influence over things in our lives. It might not be enough, much. Not all of us own land. Not all of us are homeowners. Not all of us have spaces where we can do whatever we want, whenever we want. But we all have some domain of influence. We all have some areas in our life where we do have a little bit of control, and we can bring our thumbs, our human magic into the mix. And I think part of this is just really blowing that up, that if the only place where you can get quiet is in your living room, then we build an altar or a shrine or a meditation space where we can call the shots a little bit. Of course, acknowledging always that we share space with an infinite number of non-human persons and that everyone deserves to be respected. But this kind of work tends to sort of just organically include respect for spirits of place. If you are lucky enough to own a home and own land, then, you can do what you can do with that space while honoring the trees and animals and non-human beings who also share that space with you by creating sacred space and trying to carve out a little oasis of peace in a very chaotic world. This is all the result of the human experience, human animals. A lot of us don't like the direction that things are going, but you sort of get swept up in the currents. And at the end of the day, we're running out of places to run to and hide. And so for me, as uncomfortable as I am being in the city with all the noise and everything, like it's very challenging for me. I keep thinking, if I stay here and try to be the change, that's better than if I, go move somewhere else, go move to a small town or, go live in a cabin in the woods somewhere, which I would love to do, jump at the opportunity. And it may happen someday. But for now, I try to embrace the wildness, the chaos of all of this, that it's its own kind of wild nature. It's not one that I usually agree with, but it is the world that I've been born into. And so I try to create these moments and these spaces of peace and power, whether it's tending to a garden or doing a class or, putting on noise canceling headphones so that I can get some meditation in, or waking up at 4 o'clock in the morning to go out and put my feet on the dirt because that's the time when I can have some quiet, which is a common thing in my life. Like I said, Carrie, no good answer for you on this one. It's so frustrating. Like I said, surrounded by leaf blowers and lawnmowers all more. I've been waiting for 4 hours to have quiet to do this class and finally just needed to do it. So with that, we're going to wrap it up. Thank you guys for sitting through what I'm sure is a lot of background noise. I'm going to try to edit most of it out, but it is what it is, right? We live in the concrete jungle. The wild forest of the human experience is loud and messy and sometimes beautiful too, right? So with that, thank you for all of the incredible questions, everybody. I'll see you next month.